Hey everybody, this is Dr. Todd, and I am so delighted to be here in really my home church with two very special friends. This is Pastor Glenn Packiam, Pastor Jason Jackson. They are both pastors at New Life Downtown. Pastor Glenn, you have kind of the fanciest title. You are not only lead pastor, but you're associate senior pastor of New Life Church in Colorado Springs. Pastor Jason, you're executive pastor here at New Life Downtown. And before we get into the question, just give us the little thumbnail. Pastor Glenn, I do know a little bit about you. You were a Christian contemporary music guy. You wrote a bunch of songs, and now you're finishing your doctorate. You're a preacher, and I've heard a rumor that you're an Anglican priest as well. So why don't you, these are our students here, why don't you give them just a quick thumbnail about yourself?
Well, thank you, Dr. Todd, and hello, students. Great to be able to join you today and talk about preaching, the church, two of our great passions. Yes, I've been at New Life Church for almost 18 years now, so I think when you stick around that long, you have to have a variety of different roles that you've played along the way. And I did start out in the worship ministry, but you know, when I look back at it, I was preaching has been a passion since I was a little kid. When the cousins would get together for talent shows or whatever with the family, we do our little made-up play, and then I would inflict a sermon upon everyone from age 10. So I've been inflicting sermons on people ever since.
Oh my goodness. Well, Pastor Jason, you're newer in our midst,
Yes.
and it was my delight about a little over a year ago to get to know you. I know you went to a Christian university where you first met Pastor Glenn, but you ended up in a United Methodist Church, and where you were a regular part of the preaching team. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I came to faith later in life, kind of in the high school years, and ended up pursuing kind of pastoral ministry through Christian education at a university, and became a youth pastor like late in my teen years. Spent about 8 years doing that, kind of preaching in that context of student ministry. Then headed off to seminary, and the seminary journey connected me with a UMC church in Kentucky, where I was a teaching pastor for 7 or 8 years there, and then another Methodist church in Tulsa for a while, and then here at New Life for the past year.
And so both of you regularly preach, and of course I have the privilege of occasionally preaching as well, and we're all preachers, which is a dangerous thing to get us around any microphone. The first question for the first time, our first interview, is how do you guys get from text to message? Just kind of the high altitude view. You know, you have a text. In our case, I know we go through a book or tend to go through books, and topical is a whole different thing. But Glenn, how do you do it? You're preaching in Joshua or the Psalms or the Epistles.
Well, we are in a series on the Psalms right now. I mean, at New Life, we do, like you said, we do shape our sermon series around texts, around books of the Bible. So we might do a section of a text, if we've done a series from Genesis 12 through Genesis 24, basically the life of Abraham or Abraham's family for a little bit. Or we'll take an entire book. We did the entire book of Romans last year, and then now we're doing selected Psalms. So the first thing is definitely to pick a text, but then beyond that, we're thinking about what theme or what meta theme works throughout the text. So when we did Romans, it was basically an extended reflection on the faithfulness of God and how do we tease out that theme throughout. But honestly, I think on a week-to-week level, I'm not thinking as much about, okay, let's just make sure that we've taught the text. We're really trying to find where the text speaks to the questions that are burning in people's hearts. I love the story that Miroslav Volf told, the theologian Miroslav Volf told, of when he was a young doctoral student under the theologian Jürgen Moltmann. And he said, what should I write my dissertation on? And Moltmann said, find out what moves people and then shine the light of the gospel on it. And I think there's something about the text of the scriptures and the text of people's lives and saying, where's the intersection of that? What is moving people? What are the questions people are wrestling with? And how might this particular text shine the light of the gospel?
Pastor Jason, I know your expertise is in the Old Testament. I heard a Baptist preacher once, but it was a no offense to Baptists, it was a great statement. He said,
the Old Testament.
That's right. He said, don't look to the text with your questions, but let the text ask the questions. How do you approach a text?
Yeah, I think that has always been like a huge part of my training has been in the midst of that, of saying spend as much time with the text as possible. Of course, that changes given the context of the roles and responsibilities in the church and the size and the week and the rhythms and all of those other things that we have. but trying to ask, like, what is this text trying to say? And a lot of that is trying to figure out, how does this text work within this book? How does this book work within the canon? And how does that canon help kind of shape the life of the church? And I think that sort of helps, is beginning to kind of think through how that particular text is functioning in a formative way for the people of God. And then, as Glenn was saying, going, okay, how does that then connect, particularly with the Old Testament, of saying, if we've got this idea being revealed about the character and nature and mission of God, how do we see that come to its fulfillment in Jesus? How does that then shine the gospel on it? And then for us at Downtown, we then try to take that text to the table. And so that's the other sort of component for us, is thinking, how does this text lead us to Christ and his table? And how do we as preachers help our people make that journey every single week as we lead them from the text into weekly communion?
Which really leads to that tough question of application.
Yeah.
You know, you present the text, you read it, you describe it, you explain it, you exegete it, but it has to pass the so what test. You know, do you find that you are always thinking application at the same time that you're looking at the text, or do you just exegete and then look at application, or does it vary?
It does vary, and I sometimes, in my own notes, if you were to look at my sermon outlines, that section of the outline is often a section that I call participation. Because sometimes the question that helps me, at least, is to say, how are we invited to participate in this story? How do we enter this story? And so, particularly if the text is not a didactic, do this, don't do this, one of Paul's letters or something. More often than not, it's a narrative that we're saying, how do we enter into the story in this way or in this moment? And so sometimes the application is real specific. Okay, this is what it might look like for parents or for marriages or for single folks or whatever. Other times, I really don't like to overly script that, because I think that is the Holy Spirit's role in the life of the church. And so in some ways, I'm trying to provoke a kind of hunger for people to say, man, I want to wrestle with that. Lord, how do I participate in this?
Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, I think for me, that's always been the most difficult part. If I were to, my sort of both training and wiring is toward teaching the text, and bringing in cultural backgrounds and ideas and all things, and importing too much content into the context of things. The challenge for me is I end up with all of this content, and then it's sort of parse the content down, and then in humble prayer saying, okay, Spirit, where are you leading this text?
How is it going to fill the so what test?
How does this actually intersect with people's lives? And a lot of that is, starting with, okay, how is this intersecting with my life? Because that's oftentimes where some of the illustrations come from. And then it's beginning to think through, who are the people that are here in the congregation? What are the types of lives that we're encountering? What conversations are we even having with people kind of over the course of a period of time? That's why I personally have the hardest time with guest preaching. Because you don't know the people. And yet when you know the people, all of a sudden the text starts to take on all these various forms of, where does this intersect with me, but also where does it intersect with this person or this person or this person that we know and love?
Very often, we'll be talking through an outline and we'll say, oh man, could you imagine so-and-so listening to this or so-and-so listening to this? And sometimes the question we ask ourselves is, where is the good news for so-and-so in this message?
And even in my case, because of where I'm at in my ministry, a lot of my guest preaching is at other churches, and I go through that same thing. I love when I'm the guest preacher at our church because I can fill in that same blank.
Yes.
So what about the go-to helps? We've got Logos Bible Study application. We've got all the Greek and Hebrew helps and commentaries. Is that second or third down the line? Is that simultaneous?
Honestly, sometimes. I've done it both ways, and Jason, you can speak to your own process. But there have been times when just the way I'm wired, I want to make sure I've read. Okay, I need to read 2 or 3 first before I even start to sketch an outline. But sometimes that isn't best, because you're taking in too much and you can't see the forest for the trees. And so there have been many times where I've just not opened a single book and just been contemplating the text, thinking about the story.
Multiple translations.
Or maybe even just pondering it and thinking, That's it. That's
Yeah.
where the heart of this sermon is. And then you go to the commentaries and resources to backfill to make sure I'm not misusing this or that, or that the language works, and you know.
Not like Glenn and I, you actually are good at Hebrew.
Right.
So, how about you?
But I think there is a sense in the middle of that is some of the question is how familiar am I with this text
Sure.
to begin with? And I think if it's a text that we spent a lot of time with, sometimes those things come a little bit natural or more natural or more, a little bit easier when we're just kind of processing it through. And yet the corresponding aspect of it is sometimes we're too familiar
Yes.
with the
Yes.
text and too familiar with importing our own
Yes.
like sort of preconceived ideas into that. So I try as best I can to have as much of a fresh look at the text as possible, and then if it's a text that I feel like I've done significant work in the past, then it may be kind of moving much more fluid into the actual outline. But others that text seem more and more challenging, like we had text recently in Ephesians talking about the household code side of things, and you know that this is kind of a
Controversial.
controversial text, and so you go, I go more slowly
Yeah.
through those.
Well, you did a great teaching on tithing recently, where
Yes.
you basically you said this is didactic, but I want to dismantle some misconceptions.
Yes,
here.
yeah, and knowing that about the text
That's
and
right.
its relationship to the congregation.
And if you
Yeah.
guys want to learn about that one, we can give you a podcast link. Hey,
Can I add
yeah,
one
please
one
do.
more
A
thought?
couple last thoughts here.
So when you said about the thing, a fresh look, I thought, one of the key pieces of this is we heard recently a fiction writer talking about if there's nothing surprising to the author, there won't be anything surprising to the reader.
Yeah.
And so we're guilty sometimes of being lazy with this and saying, oh, I already know what this is about.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, God, surprise me with this text once again. And so as a songwriter, the way I think about it is writing a sermon is a little bit like how I used to write songs. I would always start with the chorus.
Okay.
What's the heart of this?
What's the resonating theme?
Yeah.
Yeah, the refrain. Where's the refrain?
refrain that's going to the noble anthems
Yeah.
to our King.
Yeah, and then build to it and out of it.
What a great one. Hey, would you guys come back for another interview?
Let's do it.
Great, thank you.